to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to tonight's meeting. Do we have no one for the open forum? All right, let's go to number 4, approval of today's agenda, and I would look for a motion to approve. Neil moves, and Angie seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Noes, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. And request for donations. Paul, or do you come up and, there you go.
All right, good evening, school board. Thank you, Chair Klott, school board members. So the donation list this evening is a little lengthy, but some of them are grouped together. So we'll go through this just to make sure we're saying thank you to our community partners that are supporting our programming. So we had a Freeborn Mauer Operation Roundup donation of $250 going towards special projects. Our Kiwanis Noon Club donated $107 to our robotics program. The Southeast Service Cooperative runs an impact grant, and these grants are coded as a 096 source code. So anytime we have a grant, that category, it's considered a donation. And so that was a Matheson Tri-Gas grant, which I believe went to the welding lab project at the high school. We have box tops revenue. It's going to special projects funds at Lakeview. Ascension Lutheran Church revenue that went to Sibley special projects. And then quite a few donations coming in for our mental health glow run. So I'll just list those partners here in order. Miracle Martial Arts, miscellaneous cash donations from various community members. Patient's Choice Wellness Clinic, Pathway to Healing Counseling Services, Chime Mental Health Services, It's Worth It Wellness Studio, Horizon Homes, Nexus Gerard, Independent Management Services, and Freeborn County all made considerable donations to our mental health glow run. And I believe it's the second year we've put that fundraiser on, so a nice community event. Also received a Freeborn County SHIP grant to upgrade some existing furnishings and I think a fridge in the break room here in Brookside for our Brookside staff. May band concert donations came in at $406 and orchestra donations $115. Pepsi made a donation, again, to the mental health glow run. And then some more box top donations going to special projects or our I-35 program. And some donations to our Tiger Den at Southwest Middle School from Bridge Marathon, the Box Tops program, and Casey's. And our ALHS REACH program, a donation from the county. It's a significant donation, $2,780. And then Casey's donation to a high school classroom and some choir concert donations. So just a thank you to everybody that's supporting our programming, and quite a list there for this month, so it's worth acknowledging.
I'm looking for a motion to accept the donations. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second?
And I would comment that I'm glad that we're doing this. It's consistent with that request that was made a couple meetings ago. It's a good idea.
I would agree, and I also am glad, I just always have been curious about the shifting to free concerts, and it's good to see that there's, $700+ in revenue generated.
Yep. Yeah, because the money comes in, but it's nice to recognize the people that bring it in, because it is truly a gift, a donation that goes toward the school and the kids. All right, well, all those in favor to accept the donations as read signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose the same sign. Thank you, Mr. Durbin. Motion carries 5-0, and looking at our consent items, we could use one motion to accept or deny those, so I'd look for a motion on the consent. Neil makes a motion. Is there a second? Second. Gary, second. Any discussion or, all right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose the same sign. Consent carries. All right, on to 7, Superintendent's Report. Mr. Kranz.
Chair Clyde, members of the Albert Lee School District, Albert Lee community. Just short, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to work with you. This is my last official duty and responsibility in the district, and I've really appreciated the time. Steve and I spent the day working along with the administrative team, and it's been a good day. We've spent many hours together. And I think it's very important to understand that the work that you're doing, no matter how we approach it, no matter what our belief system is on the responsibilities, we're all working together to make sure that our kids get the best education. With the incidents that we've seen happen over the last few months and specifically over the weekend, we know that working in the public sector is not always a safe and healthy environment. So you need to be rewarded and congratulated and thanked for being willing to step up. And I was telling Steve today that you've been a great group for me to be able to work with, and I appreciate that so much. That's where it starts. You're the elected officials, you represent the community, we work for you, and I think it's important for you to understand that you've got great teachers in this district, have great families, we've got great staff, and wonderful, great leadership and our principals, and they're caring for what our kids are receiving and how they're receiving that. So thank you very much. That's my report.
All right. Well, yeah, I do have one question, Dave.
Do I say no now, or?
Is the name going to change over at the co-op? Standing joke, people.
What do you think after our last meeting?
I think therefore I am.
No, thanks again. As I said last time, we appreciate it. And yeah, since you were able to come back and help us out, we can't change the name. That was kind of my part of the bargain. So thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, let's look for school member board reports. We'll start with Gary this time.
Thanks, Chair Cloutier. I want to thank Superintendent Krenz for being here. He was the right person at the right time for us. Greatly appreciated. Graduations, I got in the tail end of the ALC graduation and attended the high school graduation. I would say of any public comments, and we all are familiar with this topic, but of any public comments over the last month, it was about a lack of choir performing at graduation. I've heard that, still hear it. So I hope that we can rectify that for the class of 2026. We had policy committee meeting, a couple finance committee meetings, and we also looked at some, we had a meeting about PSEO enrollments and the financial costs of that, and that was an informative session. And on a personal note, I attended the all-inclusive playground opening. That was very nice, and I've been there a couple times with my grandson.
Thank you. Angie.
All right, since our last business meeting, I also attended the high school and the ALC graduations and the policy committee with Gary and Kim. We went over the policies that are on the agenda tonight. Otherwise, it's a little bit slower time of year. I just want to say thank you so much to Superintendent Krenz for your leadership and your help the last few months. And I'm very excited to start working fully with Superintendent Stephen Heil next. I've been in touch just a little bit, trying not to bug you too much too early, but very excited.
Thank you.
Very similar. Attended the ALC graduation, which was awesome. Huge crowd. Great to see all the families there. High school graduation, great weather. That was a fun evening. hearing the same comments on the choir not performing at graduation from families. And again, thank you, David, for being here.
Yeah, I had a rather short week too, especially since I missed the 2 finance committee meetings that were scheduled because it isn't because I'm old and my mind is full of cobwebs. I've always been capable of forgetting about meetings. I actually didn't forget about it, just had them the wrong time in my calendar. I got the full scoop from Paul, who just a few minutes ago on the finance committee. David, you should be concerned because it seems like we agree so many times. And at our last meeting, I think we were talking about classroom management, and you suggested that it's kind of like a team effort, including the teacher and the principal. I totally agree with that. But I would like to expand that analogy and include a whole bunch of other players out there too, like students, for example, parents, for example, the whole community. And you're right, it's a team effort, and we are all on the same team. It's not us and them, it's just us. So I just thought I'd pigtail that comment that you made. Had a lot of things going on with the Education Foundation. It seems that's a busy group. Speaking of donations, I just got a donation from someone for the Education Foundation here. And there are a lot of things coming up over the summer. The most immediate are the teacher grants. And I already have a catalog of about 12, I think, applications for teacher grants. Teachers have until the 20th of this month to submit their applications for teacher grants. So that's it.
A couple finance committee meetings. We had our annual MSBA directors meeting, and our next meeting will be in September. We'll do a retreat up at Craigan's. It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. So anyway, we look forward, we got some other changes we're making in there. And we've all talked about the graduation, and yes, we look for that to be different next year again, to give our seniors that chance to get up there and have their one last performance before they leave our school. And finally, I missed the ALC graduation because I was coaching baseball. I just have to say that we got to the 3rd place this time in our section, the highest that we've been in the western section. And Mankato East, who won our section, went on to get 2nd in the state, and now they will move up to 4A next year. So we'll see how that goes. All right, teacher report.
Hello, I'm Janice Jeffrey. I'm an English teacher at the high school. Lots of things going on in the summer for teachers. There's targeted services and credit recovery and community ed programs and sports programs that continue to happen even when the school year is over. And of course, teachers that are going back to school for their continuing education credits. But most of all, I really hope that they are getting the rest and relaxation that they need to come back in August and be ready to go. And also, thank you to Superintendent Krenz for your service for us. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Janice. Okay. All right, past 9.1. Janice, I guess you're up for the ATTPS annual report.
Hello, again, Janice Jeffrey. I'm the ATPPS coordinator for the district. Let's see, so this year, or I should start with what is ATPPS, the Alternative Teacher Performance Pay System. We've been part of that group for 21 years when it first started in Minnesota. And the purpose is to improve instruction and student achievement, provide professional development, and encourage collaboration amongst our teachers. There are some leadership opportunities for teachers. The district coordinator, which is the one that I have, there's release time and a stipend. There's 8 instructional coaches in the district. They also have some release time and a stipend. But with that release time, they also are teaching, so they remain in the classroom part of the day as well. And for the last 21 years, we've also had instructional team leaders that also receive a stipend. You'll notice the asterisk next to that, and I'll be talking about that later in our changes for the program. Let's see, some job-embedded professional development is one of our goals. The PLCs meet every Wednesday for 45 minutes. That time is blocked off for the district, 7:30 to 8:15. No other meetings are ever scheduled those days. Those are when the teachers get together and work on their professional development and their instructional development. Their goal is to answer 4 critical questions, so it's referred to as cycle work. And every time you meet, you are talking about what you want students to learn, how you will know when they've learned it, how to respond when they don't learn it, and what to do if they already have learned it. Added to that recently and in the red print is to increase our instructional competency. And that was added as we added Marzano into our instructional practices and our evaluation practices. As part of this program, teachers are evaluated by peers. If you're non-probationary, you'll have 2 peer reviews. Your instructional coaches will meet with you, talk about what you're teaching, they'll observe it, and then you'll discuss those, the observations afterwards and make a plan for the next one. So you just keep working on that cycle and you're improving your instructional competency. If you're a probationary teacher, you don't have observations with the instructional coach unless you request, because you're already doing 3 as required by statute with your administrator. And then there's 3 informal observations where you go out and observe what other teachers are doing. And you can do that in 2 different ways. Instructional rounds are where a group of people go and watch 2 or 3 other classrooms and then debrief on that afterwards. Or you can select on your own and go watch different things that you want to see. This is just a visual representation of the observation model that I described, where you pre-conference with the instructional coach, observation happens, you debrief and plan and collaborate. Right now, the performance pay incentive for meeting all the goals on your individual growth plan is $1,300, and it's broken down, as you can see, $150 if your building meets their site goal, $50 if you meet your individual goal based on student achievement, $300 for peer review and observations, and then $800 for the weekly PLC attendance doing that cycle work that we talked about with the 4 essential questions. This year, 56% of teachers met their individual SMART goals based on student achievement, which is a great accomplishment for those teachers and for those students. This, I believe you're familiar with. It's just the instructional model of, that we use to select what we want to work on as individual teachers in our classrooms. So some of the successes this year, Albert Lea High School achieved Level 2 certification of effective teaching for the Marzano High Reliability Schools, as did Southwest. The elementary schools, they are starting their Level 2 certification in the fall, and so hope to achieve that by spring of 2026. And Southwest in the high school will be working on Level 3 then, next year. They'll start that. HBPS continues to have high success with 94% of teachers participating and completing their IGP goals. Some program recommendations for next year. We are experiencing budget shortfalls within the program. It's supposedly a self-sustaining program, but the state hasn't raised the dollar amount in the years that it has existed. And so we proposed these changes to the program to save money within the program and keep the elements that we agreed were the strongest. So we will continue requiring 2 formal peer reviews with the instructional coaches. Everybody agreed that that was valuable and important. We will be eliminating the 41 instructional team leaders. That was a very hard discussion for the teachers and the administrators. They definitely see the value, but we also could see ways to, after 21 years, to create the agenda within the team and take the attendance within the team, and just, there were ways we could work around and save money on those leadership positions. The informal peer observations, where teachers go observe other teachers or do the instructional rounds in groups where they're observing teachers, is eliminated. That was worth $150 in the payout, and so that reduces the overall payout from $1,300 to $1,150. These changes will save about $80,000 in the program that we hope will keep the program sustainable for a little bit longer. Questions?
If I remember, 21 years is the first year the program was offered in the state, correct?
Yes, we were in on the groundbreaking of that program, yeah.
And not every school is part of it.
They are not.
Yep.
No.
So it was quite a nice thing that was done here when
Yes.
we were able to get into that, so.
Yes.
Good. It's been a great program. When I taught down in Texas, we had a similar program, but to be frank, it wasn't this detailed. So it was this nice program.
It
Thank you.
is, yes, thank you.
No other questions or comments, Janice? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
All right, effective and efficient operations, 10.1, athletic department presentation on adaptive sports and school activities participation update. Mr. Langerud.
that's something you guys can talk about.
Just as we've worked together on this, Dave, thank you very much, very in-depth. One of the people I followed up with was Sheila, being in charge of overseeing our special ed programs, and she was very positive. Sheila, do you have any comments or any?
I'm very excited.
I just want to say, we've never even had this brought to us before. Thank you. Nice program. I knew there was very limited on the number of sports they had at the State High School League, but interesting, it's never been attempted before, so thanks.
Ready to find an easy way to online ticketing? GoFan at Albert Lee Schools is the way to go.
Whether it's a sports activity, musical, prom, or even a senior dinner, you will need to have GoFan every step of the way. This video is to help guide you along the way to help get access to your tickets and give you more insight on what GoFan is. Thanks, Jazz. So, how can you access your ticket for games and events? First, search for GoFan by typing in your search bar, gofan.co. From there, search the home school of the game or event you are going to attend. Once you find your school, you will be able to see everything from single events to season and yearly passes, as well as free students and staff passes.
Dave, is there a cost for the platform GoFan and Albert Lee Live to the district?
There is not.
That's not, okay.
No. No, there's actually a partnership that we have, and we can actually do some, which I'll be coming to you guys eventually after I work with our finance manager, Calder, on a little bit on some cooperative revenue sharing for advertising and things like that. So we can make some money from, when I left St. Cloud, I was bringing in about $70,000 a year in advertising. And that was using those kind of apps off of our scoreboards, as well as through the live streaming. And so that's money that I should be bringing in from an advertising perspective, so we can use it for activities.
Yeah,
But there is no cost to us.
okay.
So Dave, the training for coaches and officials, has that changed from the past? I know it's been through Coach's Clipboard, there have been several other platforms, but it seems like it's always a nightmare to figure out how to get onto the system. And then for people like probably Dave and me, who are both have to do the registration, the procedures for coaches and officials, and a lot of them are the same. Is there any improvements in line there?
One question, back to the adaptive sports. Do you know, you maybe said this in the presentation, but how common is it for districts to have adaptive sports teams? Do you know how many there are in the state?
I don't know how many are
Well, thank you for checking into it. I just think what a great time to have this presentation as we wrap up the all-inclusive playground in the community, which was a big success, thanks to Sarah Stoltz with the Alberta Tribune and Davey Valerial, who were our school board member, who were really behind it. This just kind of streams right along with it. So really enjoyed hearing that that could be a possibility. The other thing I hear out in the community, and I just want to share, Dave, that your involvement with the feeder programs and going to 8-year-old programs, I'm hearing this from parents, I'm hearing how awesome the district's athletic director is, because he's down there starting in the young, with the young kids, feeder programs that the school's not really involved in yet, but talking about teamwork and what it means to be a good team member, and sports should be fun. And so just thank you for your work.
I have one other question. I noticed clay target for the middle school. Is there a clay target team at the high school?
Yes.
Oh, there is.
Well, the clay target team just got back from state.
Oh,
They did an
good.
amazing
Thanks.
job. Yeah, and it's, yes.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
All right. That's hard work, Dave Langerud, so thank you. I think there's some good things to consider there from Director Langerud, so. Thank you, school board members, board chair Klott. I do have a handout for this. I was hoping to have it out before everybody snuck in today, but I got here too late, so I'll just take a moment. All right, so June of 2024, we established an adopted budget for this fiscal year 25. And then each year we will have a revised budget and a final budget. And this afternoon, or this evening, excuse me, we'll be taking a look at our final budget for fiscal year 25 and also approving our preliminary budget for fiscal year 26. So you have a budget book in front of you this evening, and we're going to highlight the contents of that budget in this presentation as well. All right, so just always like to review a little bit on school finance budgets. Our budget contains 5 main funds: general fund, food service fund, community service fund, and building construction fund, and debt service fund. For the purpose of our presentation tonight, where our significant changes occur, the 4 funds that are bold there, general fund, food service, community service, and construction fund, we'll take a dive into those this evening. So a couple other reminders that budgets are our best estimate to where we will end the fiscal year. So when we have the final budget, the revisions here today for the fiscal year 25, those are estimated ending budgets for the fiscal year 25. And a reminder, your fiscal years are July 1st through June 30th of each year. So this June 30th will bring close to fiscal year 25, and we will open our fiscal year 26 on July 1st. One other element to remember is that the records, the actual books, aren't tied out at this point, because we may receive bills or invoices or expenditures well into fiscal year 26 that are intended for fiscal year 25. For example, maybe a utility bill might come in June in July or August, which is technically a 25 expense. So that is the purpose for our independent audit that will be conducted in the fall. Once the books are finalized, we have Smith and Schaefer come in. They will take all of our financial records, do a deep dive, and present an audit to you in the winter. So all that comes into play here. So review for this revision. The general fund revenues, you see here for fiscal year '25, total revenue of $60,646,266. And in your budget book, if you would turn to the first table, I think it's page 5, maybe? Page 5. You'll see the total revenues under the final 24-25 revenues column, under total general fund, $60,646,266. You see the bulk of our revenue comes from state aid. Some highlights regarding revenue for this fiscal year. Noted our state aid is about 80% of our revenues, and enrollment is the biggest factor in driving revenues. So this year has been an interesting year with our ADM projections. It's been more challenging than a typical year to predict. We feel we have a better handle on it now as we get close to the year end, so this is a good time, if necessary, to adjust our ADM estimates. We did do that for the final budget, which is why our revenues maybe changed a little bit. So if you remember back to our revised budget in March, we revised our budget to reflect 3,360 ADM. Now, with our end-of-year projections, the school year coming to a close, we can take our actual seat counts and kind of cross-check those estimates. We did scale this back to be conservative for our final budget. We used a ADM of 3,328 students. And a reminder, ADM means average daily membership. So they take the number of students, or number of days a student is enrolled in your district, and you would divide that by your board-approved instructional days to get a ADM for each student. And the sum of those would be our 3,328. All right, also looking at our revenues, our state aid increased from fiscal year '24 to fiscal year '25. Our federal aid decreased slightly, mostly due to our ESSER funds sunsetting this year. So some other items to consider when we look at our revenues. We, this year, had the READ Act funding. We received additional special ed aid, additional unemployment reimbursement, and then we had our general education aid increase. So if you would turn to page 7 in your budget book, we have a breakdown of those revenue sources. And this slide is just another way to look at our revenues. This chart is also on page 8 of your budget book. And you see a large portion, our largest portion, is for instruction and pupil support. So in our classrooms, about 83% of our budget. So when we look at expenditures, some highlights from the fiscal year '25, some changes from '24 to '25. There's a few different ways we can look at expenditures and revenues by our UFARS codes, which is our Uniform Financial Accounting Standards. One is called a program code, and another would be an object code. So we'll look at it from two different lenses today just to see the changes. Now, some of those increases, and this kind of got us crossed up at the revised budget a little bit, I want to make sure we're clear. Some of those may, like if we talk about a salary increase, it might also be an instructional increase. So those may feed into each other. They're not going to sum or add together to, they're not separate, I suppose. So I'll try to clarify as necessary on that conversation. So in this slide here, we see that elementary, secondary instruction increased, our expenditures increased by $830,000 this year. If you want to look at a full chart with the program codes, page 9 in the budget book has the whole list. These are highlights from that table. Instructional support was decreased by $208,000. Sites and buildings increased $392,473. And our special education costs increased $1,214,290. I also want to note that some of these increase or decreases may come in line with revenue changes as well. So for example, special ed program may also come with a revenue source or reimbursement that comes with that. So the expenditures are not just a straight increase, sometimes they may have revenue tied to them as well. Okay, so continuing to looking at by object. So on the bottom of page 9 in your budget book, the large ones here, we saw a large salary and benefit increase for fiscal year 24-25. A lot of those increases may have been with grants or title funds or other revenue sources where revenue came with for those increases. Also, the capital expenditure increase of $1,024,022. You know, a lot of this we saw at our revised budget, and at that point, we noted that we bought all new elementary furniture this year. That was all funded through ESSER funds. So there's a perfect example where we increased the expenditure $750,000 approximately for that furniture. The revenue was increased as well. And we saw a decrease in supplies and materials from fiscal year 24 and the fiscal year 25. Want to note that decrease, which I think part of that is accounted to. We put a stop at the revised budget time to any unnecessary purchases in the district, and we stood to that standard through the school year. So helped us get to a better place with our fund balance. Another note with those salaries and benefits, when we talk about expenditures, unemployment is one of those. Substitute costs is one of those. They all come in and they all add up. And we've noted those increases in the revised budget too as well. All right, so here's just kind of a general rundown of some changes that are important for us to reflect on when we look at the change in expenditures for this fiscal year. So we talked about the elementary furniture with ESSER funds. There were other ESSER funds as well. Those are now going to be sunsetted this year. So we won't see any revenue or expenditure for ESSER funds in fiscal year 26. We had a lot of grant-funded staff positions. We did see some additional hires this year, which we addressed at the revised budget time. An increase in substitute costs, a large increase. Non-licensed staff, we saw an increase there. We had superintendent salary and benefits was an increase that was unplanned, and we noted the unemployment costs and the READ Act. And the READ Act is one of those, and as well as the unemployment, where the revenues will match those expenditures. So moving on in the final budget to our food service fund, if you want to turn to page 10 in budget book, outlines the revenues and the expenditures. Now, if you remember to the revised budget in March, we talked about increasing our expenditures in the food service fund so that we could spend down that fund. We had been seeing an increase in expenditures for multiple years, and if we reached 6 months operating costs, we would have to enter an MDE spend down plan. So to avoid that, we updated our expenditures in the revised budget to try and bring our fund balance down. 3 items that we added that had significant cost at that time to our food service budget were cafeteria furniture at Albert Lee High School, cafeteria furniture at Southwest Middle School, and also equipment for the kitchens at Albert Lee kitchen at Albert Lee High School. The furniture orders for the cafeteria furniture will be in this summer. That'll be a nice addition. The furniture we had was getting very dated, worn down. It was ready for replacement, and the floors were starting to get really beat up because of the old, worn-out furniture. So it'll have a compounding impact by having a little bit nicer equipment in there. However, there was about $100,000 in equipment costs that we were adding to this year's budget that the contractors weren't able to get supplied in time by June 30th. So that will get pushed into fiscal year 26 budget. So you see a slight pullback on those anticipated expenditure increases. Sorry, long story to get to that point. A reminder that we are part of a federal meals program, the CEP program. And part of the funding for that does funnel through state aid, but it is a federal food service program. All right, this chart in front of you represents those fund balances that we talked about in the revised budget. This isn't in your budget book, but it's just something to make sure we look at. So we were seeing an increase. If you look at the numbers on the left from fiscal year 20 through fiscal year 24, we saw an increase of over $400,000 in that fund balance. So in fiscal year 24, we saw another increase. And so that prompted us in fiscal year 25, after we received the audit results, that it's probably time to start working that balance down. And so we plan those increased expenditures, and that's where you see that net of minus $295,568 for this fiscal year. That'll leave us in a good place for fiscal year 26. All right, so the revenue budget for community service, $1.8 million approximately in revenue for community service fund. And expenditures just over 1.8 million, so 1,893,463. And I want to compliment Director Double. This year has been challenging to manage a community service budget. There were some increased salary expenditures that were laid upon him that he handled with grace, but it really meant that he had some more challenges with this budget. So at the end of the day, all of our community service fund balances are still a positive balance and leave us in a position for fiscal year 26 to be in a good place. So there were some staff changes mid-year and some staffing assignments, and for appropriate coding, if the staff were working directly in community ed, they had to be coded to community ed. And so that wasn't a planned expenditure in community service and resulted in more expenses. So that is going back now with the model in fiscal year 26 and part of our reduction plan to the way it was, and it'll be easier for that management for Director Double. All right, highlights of final budget community service funds. So we noted those challenges with increased expenditures with staffing. I do want to also note that our Tiger Cub Child Care Director Double came to our Finance Committee meeting 2 weeks ago, and he presented that their budget is in a better place this year. It will not be in a deficit this fiscal year. So that was encouraging to see. I think we all acknowledge that there's still some listening to do and some growth to do with that program, but just to be aware at the board level and publicly that the finances for this fiscal year were in a better place. It came out where we weren't in a deficit this school year. All right, so your final budget, this is hard to do, and so I know Director Langenrud was joking about spreadsheets on a PowerPoint, but welcome to my world, Dave. So here's one that we have. This is the top half of the actual budget that you were provided in your board packet that we'd be asking for approval tonight. So this depicts your general fund. So basically just took the top half of the one spreadsheet for you to consider. And the fund balance that this would leave us at is an 11.63 fund balance for the final budget for fiscal year 25. If you remember to our revised budget, we were projecting 11.01. So the measures that we took, and I want to thank Superintendent Krenz for the support in a lot of our staffing decisions and saying no to a lot of our expenditures and a lot of our moves from the revised budget to now. We were able to bounce back with our final budget from the revised, from that 11.01 to the 11.63. And then here is the spreadsheet representing our food service fund, community service fund, construction fund, and any other various funds that we have, a small scholarship, our self-insured fund, and debt service. So I know we have two agenda items this evening. I would ask if it's okay to continue into the next item for fiscal year 26 preliminary and then open to discussion. I believe that the final budget ties directly into our fund balance for fiscal year 26 starting balance, and it's a good transition. So if you're okay with that, I just keep rolling. Okay. All right, so starting with a reminder about the reductions we made at revised budget, or we committed to make. So the district made $2 million in reductions this spring. Those are not immediate reductions. When those notices go out and those conversations are had and the news is delivered, that is for the fiscal year 26 school year, so 25, 26 school year. Those changes are implemented for next year, and the goal with those changes is to maintain our healthy fund balance, or in this case, improve our fund balance. I want to make sure that we say it publicly and say it here. Oftentimes, making reductions is the responsible and the necessary step to take in order to maintain healthy financial status. In our case, to maintain a 12% fund balance in our goal, we will likely have to make similar reductions next year, and that is part of this process. Those are not always in term to make reductions in response. It's to be maintaining our fund balance. So here are some changes that are impacting our fiscal year 26 preliminary budget. There's been a lot happening legislatively and a lot of uncertainty. And so we'll try to kind of talk through here what is built into the budget, what we know, what we're assuming, and then we'll look at the details of what the budget looks. And remember, the budget is our best estimate of where we're going, and we will revise and do a final budget next fiscal year as well. So here are some changes for fiscal year 26. The state has a basic formula increase of 2.74% in our general education aid. I want to remind the board, we've talked about this at one other point, but that is not all revenue. That is general education aid, which is about 49% of our revenues that we generate as a school district. So that 2.74% is not realistically a 2.74% in revenue increase. TRA, so our teacher retirement, is going to increase from 8.75 to 9.81 employer contribution. And that takes effect after July 1st of 2025. That is included in our budget. We won't have READ Act funding in fiscal year 26. That was one-time money, so that is not included in this budget. We've removed that from any budgeting here. We have adopted a 10% health insurance increase for fiscal year 26, and we're realizing a 17% property insurance increase for fiscal year 26. Also, ESSER funds are sunsetting in as of September of this year, and we won't see those federal funds. So all those are built into this budget, all those changes. And I have a list of assumptions for us to consider here today as well. So this is built into the budget. There's a lot of items that we're uncertain about, and that's part of the reason we need to always come back for a revision at some point during the year. So this first one, Minnesota paid leave, is going to be a payroll tax to all employers in the state of Minnesota. And as of January 1st of 26, so that isn't until mid-year, but then we'll start having to pay a payroll tax of 0.44%. So for half of the year, we're paying that. So we budgeted in half the year at 0.44%. Now, the latest bill that was passed, I think, has a cap of 1.1 on this tax. This is a 0.88 here. So in future years, this may increase as well. We have an assumption on our compensatory dollars. There was a governor's proposal, and that bill went and passed. It's a hold harmless based on our compensatory enrollment in fiscal years 24 and fiscal year 26, I think, whichever was greater. And in our case, we'll be winners with this hold harmless. It's still going to be less revenue than fiscal year 25, but it's better than the current law that was in place. And that number will vary based off of enrollment, ADMs. And so for the assumption, the purpose here, we added $107,006 to the current law to our revenue for compensatory. At this point, that's our best estimate until we get actual revenue projection models from the state updated. Unemployment reimbursement, we're assuming we'll have all those costs reimbursed this year. There's uncertainty on Title II and Title III federal programs. We did not budget for those this year because if we don't receive those funds, we don't want to have expenditures that are, out there not covered. So we don't have a revenue or expenditure for those programs. If they are developed, it would be a hope that they would cover for some other expenditure that we currently have and help us, but they would obviously have to be appropriate costs. And then also we have a non-exclusionary discipline grant that we did not budget for in fiscal year '26. The current grant that we were operating under expired this year. We have an application out there for fiscal year '26, but we don't have any indication on whether we'll be winners on receiving that grant for the next year. So same thing, we didn't budget for any of those expenditures or revenues this year. Also, we know about special ed transportation reimbursement. Fiscal year '26 will be reimbursed at 95% for special ed transportation, and in fiscal year '27 will be reimbursed at 90%. That's a change from full reimbursement. The other items here, I guess we can jump into our preliminary budget. Let me just check, make sure I don't skip anything on those assumptions. Okay, so our, some highlights from our preliminary budget. And if you want to turn to page 14 in your budget book, there's some more detail on these highlights there. We're going to experience a projected decrease in revenue of $739,516. So what happened with our revenue, we saw a general fund basic formula increase, and that's fighting basically a decline in enrollment. So when our enrollment's declining, even with an increase in that formula, we're still seeing a little bit of decrease. We're also seeing a decrease in our levy, which you approved in the 24 pay 25 levy last December. So with 24 pay 25, remind you what that means is that we're paying taxes in 25 and we're going to realize that in revenue in 26. So last year's levy is impacting this upcoming year's revenue. And we've approved a decrease in our levy. We're also going to experience less federal funds. So that's just kind of a rough summary on the decrease in revenue for fiscal year '26. We're also going to see a decrease in expenditures after assumptions for all of our benefits and other incurred costs based on inflation or increases and assumption on wages. We see a decrease in our expenditures of $1,911,699. So that does show the impact of our $2 million in reductions we made. Also, the big thing here, our board goal of maintaining a 12% fund balance. The budget as presented this evening would be a budget with a 12.18 general fund balance. I do want to draw your attention to, and we're going to jump around a little bit. I believe it's page 18. This is a really big table, and I apologize. There's a lot going on here, but I want to make sure I address, for those of you with a budget book here, a correction, and then also this allows others to see this table here. So this table breaks down our expenditures from our audited results in fiscal year '23, our audited results in fiscal year '24, our proposed final budget for fiscal year '25, and our proposed preliminary budget for fiscal year '26. So what this allows you to do is see how our expenditures are fluctuating from year to year in these different categories. And remember, we can look at them in different ways. And a good example here might be in that top row, salaries. Right, we see it changing from, say, 53.48% to 55 to 54 to 54. It's pretty consistent there. Now, if we look down in the next row, that middle set of numbers, salaries might be spread out a lot of those different program codes. So it's kind of, they overlap a little bit, right? Those costs they're just looking at them in different ways. In the sum, the total expenditures should tie out at the bottom in those pink bars for each of those. So if you look at all the expenditure object codes for fiscal year '23, they're $56,657,934. Same when you look at the program codes and same when you look by site. So what this allows you to do is just kind of compare expenditures whichever way you prefer and how we're using those dollars. Now, the one thing I'd like to ask the board here to look at is in the bottom right box, I had the wrong value for district-wide. I hit the wrong entry on my finance software for district-wide other. So where that says 15,387,182 on my screen up here, that changes our total and it changes our percentages in that box. So however particular you are about that table, if you want to make an adjustment, please do. You'll be off a couple $100,000 on that last box if you don't see that. So the bottom right corner. And that does impact the percentages there too. I just don't want to give you bad info.
I think it's important to note, if you look at the numbers, the increase, substantial increase between fiscal year '24 and '25, which would have been previous year and then this year, almost a $3 million increase. Paul, cabinet, principals and staff have done a tremendous job bringing that number back down to what our fiscal year '24 budget was. And I think that's substantial and needs to be noted. They've done a tremendous job getting us there.
So the test will be maintaining this and enforcing that we're going to stick to it. So we're committed to that, and we'll be, any unforeseen surprises we'll get out in front of and make sure we address. And I'm getting better at saying, I'm getting really, not better, but it's still hard. I talked about that today, but saying no a lot, right? So we got to be disciplined in maintaining these expenditures. So does anybody need more time on that spreadsheet there, that bottom right, updating the numbers? I apologize for that. It was an oversight. Okay, so back to the presentation here. The next slide here will show how that fund balance is fluctuating. So essentially, we're taking the revenues, our money in, our expenditures, and we're finding the net change in this table. So this is on page, should be right there, 19 in your book. And with that net change, for example, fiscal year '24, we had an increase of $494,771. And now to Superintendent Krenz's point, from '24 to '25, that net increase from revenue and expenditures was a decrease of over $1 million. And so what happened, that beginning fund balance, we'd add that net to it, and we were in a good place with our fund balance in '24. That decrease brought our fund balance down to 11.63. And now for '26, our preliminary budget that we've built has a 12.18% fund balance. We were able to maintain and increase our expenditures a little bit. Now I want to make sure we point out the asterisks that our fund balance at District 241, our policy allows us to subtract some expenditures from our fund balance calculation. Those are long-term facility maintenance, operating capital, student activities, scholarships, and TRA, PERA, special funding situation pensions, which is our UFAR's object code 891. So when we crunch those formulas, it's not a straight, one number divided by another. We subtract those expenditures from our sum when we do that. So that if you try to crunch the numbers right off of this, you would actually need the bigger budget table to come up with that number. And anybody interested in digging that deep, I would certainly be willing to sit down and look at it with them, but it's kind of complicated. Okay, so also back to Superintendent Krenz's point about what happens when our expenditures get ahead of our revenues. If you take a look at this next slide, this is graph 4 from page 20 in your budget book. This is an overlaying of our trend in revenues and expenditures. Those are the line graphs, the red being the expenditures, the blue being our revenues. And then the bar graph behind it is what our fund balance looked like. So what you see is when that expenditure exceeds your revenue, the impacts on your fund balance, right? So we can see that natural consequence of our expenditures exceeding our revenues this fiscal year. All right. So moving into our food service budget, Fund 2. I've got on the screen here a side-by-side on page 21 in your budget book. There's a breakdown with some highlights here. The food service fund, as we noted in our final budget presentation, is still in a very healthy position after fiscal year '25. We spent down a considerable amount. Reminder that we didn't get those expenditures for some kitchen equipment in this fiscal year, so those will come off next year. We'll build that in as we are able to try and avoid any MDE sped down plan. However, I think with a year of reduced expenditures there, we're in an okay place where it's not as urgent to make those expenditures. But we'll continue to monitor this fund balance. Okay, the next slide is our community service fund. Again, this is one, I know Director Double had some advisory committee meetings with his community service or community education. He's now taking early learning programming back into community education. And so we've got some plans here. We're going to be digging in deep to this budget and just looking at how realistic what rolled over to fiscal year '26 is. In either case, the preliminary budget is showing a fund balance in all community ed funds, and that's an important piece there. We can't go or carry a negative balance in anything community ed. And looking into our preliminary budget, our construction fund, I wanted to bring this up because we will hopefully spend down the excess of our fund balance there. So if you remember, in 2022, the school board approved the sale of some leftover bonds or available bonds to complete some safety projects. The last of that fund we've been using to rekey classroom doors and make our classrooms more safe and our facilities more safe. We have all our safe and secure entryway projects that were done in the last school year. We added some cameras with those funds initially, I think in 2022. And so those funds, there's still some balance there. So if we look at this table, we had a fund balance of $776,000 in that in fiscal year '24. Excuse me. I don't have them broken down by specific code in this table. In the total construction fund, we had a fund balance $776,000. And the net change in all of our revenues and expenditures, we increased by $1,686,174. So when we look at this table, it does break down the revenues and expenditures of each fund. The other fund, I guess we haven't mentioned, is the 2024 building bond. We used for mechanical upgrades. So we've been talking a lot about our boilers at Southwest Middle School, Lakeview Elementary, and the pool HVAC at Albert Lee High School. That was the $3,945,722 you see in the top of this chart. That was new revenue that year as we sold the bonds. And then we spent $2,267,392 in fiscal year '24. So we had a fund balance in our construction fund that year of $2,462,452. And then the next year, this year, we only accrued interest in our revenues. So the $27,541 and the $35,285 were interest off of those accounts. And then expenditures for those two projects totaled $2,148,526. And I note that our expenditures for fiscal year '25, I don't know how much we highlighted this, I can't remember on that slide specifically, but we're higher in '25 because the project's actually a little ahead of pace. So that's why these expenditures will be a little bit lower than we were initially thinking, but it'll leave a fund balance this year of $376,752. So what we hope next year is that we can spend down these construction funds and close them out and be done in fiscal year '26. So you see expenditures exceeding our revenues by $376,752, which would be the total of our fund balance and leave us with no more money in our construction fund, closing out those projects. So. All right, so also this preliminary budget table, again, I apologize, trying to get these on a screen is a challenge, but I think it's sufficient here. So this top portion is the general fund. Oh, I did receive a question today about fiscal year 25's balance for QComp, and I'll try to address it here today. So I'm just going to quick zip back to before we close things out. Just respectfully, I want to hold that promise true. So our fund balance in our QComp, which is, as Janice Jeffrey presented as our ATPPS coordinator tonight, that is our teacher performance pay. It's a state program. We receive aid based on our ADMs every fiscal year, a certain amount. And then the teachers and our curriculum department will build a budget for the use of those funds tied to the MOU that's approved yearly by the board. And so what we can see here is that this year, when fiscal year 25, so this budget that's on the board right now is representing fiscal year 25. And if you can turn to the projection screen up here, this balance, $145,965, was a carryover balance. So that is build up funds from money that goes back to buildings, or when our funds aren't used, or maybe a goal isn't met and it doesn't get used up in a back to building funds. The way the program would work is if goals aren't met, the money goes back specifically to the buildings for professional development. And they decide how those are used to grow to meet their future goals. Well, so that combination, that $145,965 and the $862,904, the $862,904 here was what we predict from our revenue projection model that we'll receive in revenue for QComp this year. So those two amounts is what is the amount of money that was there for the budget for fiscal year 25. The total expenditures that were budgeted were $1,014,188. So that was just a little bit over the total of these two budgets combined, or that carryover in the state aid that we received. And so to clarify what this means is there's a $5,319 amount coming out of our general fund if these projections hold true. And remember, they're just projections. The one item to note is that the teacher performance pay hasn't all been paid out. So there's some uncertainty in the exact end of year dollar amount that we will see. And right now, this is more of the worst case scenario, this where we'll see. So there might be, and the reason I wanted to go back to the final budget presentation is when we look at our preliminary budget for fiscal year, and we're kind of getting the weeds here, but when we look at our fiscal year 26 preliminary budget, where we see committed for QComp, there is no fund balance there. There may be some to start the year. And I'll reflect on that a little deeper. If anybody has questions about the QComp process, it's really interesting. I'm still learning more about it, but we can certainly sit down and look at the actual budget that's been prepared by staff if anybody's interested. And with that said, any questions at all from the board, if you would like to come in and look at any of these specific funds or classes, look at the specific codes or detail, I'd welcome that. So please just give me an email and we can set up a time and look at them. I think it would be good for us to start doing some more deep dives on that sort of thing. So there's your preliminary 26 general fund, showing a fund balance of $7,414,401. And I'll remind you, that's not money sitting in account, that's a total assets. So that might be money that we're anticipating to come in revenue, balanced out with our expenditures that took place in that certain year. It's not like we're sitting on that pile of cash in our bank account at any given time. For example, a lot of our revenue won't come in until after this fiscal year's over in a cleanup from MDE. So they do a 10% cleanup once they know our final ADMs, that sort of thing. Now here's the Fund 2, Fund 4, Fund 6 fund totals. And just another note that the Fund 6 fund balance, hoping to close that out next year. And if we do so, then in 27, we likely won't see any numbers in that section. Probably be able to omit that from the presentation.
Paul, you might want to you know, the board mostly has been through all this before, but for the public, you know, they might be asking, well, why would you take a positive fund balance like the construction fund and pay that off? Doesn't that help you out? They might not understand that you can't,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, so we sold the bonds for proceeds for those projects, and they're sitting in an account, and they do accrue interest. And there's something called arbitrage, where you only have so much time, and you can only collect so much interest on those to use those funds up. Also, as those projects continue, if it's one specific project at one specific site, we have to monitor what's called construction in progress, and it's kind of a nightmare in our business office to, not a nightmare, but it's another process that isn't necessary if we can close these down and end those projects within a fiscal year. So there is some eagerness to close them down, and we don't want to sit on those funds. It isn't allowable to leave them open forever and just sit on those as a nice little buffer. So good point, and thank you for bringing that up. And the other thing to consider is when we talk about our funds, and I'm glad you did bring this up, we do have a healthy fund balance in, say, like our food service fund. It is not allowable at this time to move funds from Fund 2 to Fund 1 or use Fund 2 to pay for expenditures that would be otherwise required to fund out of Fund 1. So there has been some legislation that passed, and we'll get some more information on the specifics of this law that allows more flexible use of Fund 2 funds to maybe pay for custodial, or if we're doing any capital projects in the kitchen, we could potentially use Fund 2 to pay for electrical and plumbing, that sort of thing. It hasn't been allowable in the past. So we're thankful for any flexibility we can use between funds when the opportunity does come up. But right now, they're limited for their restricted uses. All right, so a couple reminders. So this evening, I apologize, I think we have two agenda items. I think it's two motions and two approvals, or can you do them under one? I think we should do two probably for each budget. And then the fall preliminary levy will be back in September to present our preliminary levy. And then the audit will be taking place around that time. Well, the auditors will be in our building and digging deep into our finances, and our team will be hard at work on that. And that presentation will come back in November. We're also planning to have our finance committee bring a report back to the school board in that September timeframe. Just to the extra meetings, the discussions where they're going, more on that long-term financial sustainability, long-term finance plan. So then this winter, we'll certify our 25 pay 26 final levy. That's in December. And shortly after that, we'll look to revise the budget that's before you today. Hope to do a revised budget earlier in the winter than March. I feel like the sooner we can get that one in, the better we'll be positioned to wrap up our school year. So I believe that's what I have for you tonight. So thank you.
Okay, so to make sure we do this correctly, I'm going to look for a motion for approval for 10.2, which is the final 24-25 budget, and a second, and then we will open that up for discussion and vote, and then we'll do the same thing for 25-26.
I'll make a motion to or to approve the final fiscal year 25 budget.
I'll second.
And a second? Okay. Ladies. Is there any discussion on 24-25 final budget?
Again, I thank you for all the work you did this year in bringing down those expenditures and addressing the budget issues we had.
I want to emphasize, I think it's a big deal that Tiger Cub is ending the year not in a deficit. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough, because we were here, I don't know, a year ago, and it was 6 figures of deficit. So it's tremendous work on John's part and your part to get us to where we're at today.
I agree. Compliments to Director Double on that.
All right, any other, see no discussion, let's vote on 24-25 final budget. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose the same sign. Okay. Okay, so 24-25 passes 5-0, and I would look for a motion for 25-26. Neil, motion.
Second.
And Mary Jo, second. Any discussion on 25-26?
I just have a
Preliminary.
general comment, and I don't know what the standard is for a school district, but I noticed this, the pattern of our spending. And I think sometimes we complain about administration a little bit, having been one myself. But we consistently are spending less than 4% of our budget on administrative costs. Is there a standard in school budget construction that would be considered good practice? Or, I mean, I don't understand the depth of that.
I believe this is a trick question for a couple different reasons. One, the way our UFARS coding works. We could simply code an administrator that's in a gray area to a different finance code, and maybe they won't fall under that umbrella. And a lot of times schools will do that to make it look like their administration costs are lower. That's not something we would do, but it's hard to compare districts because then you got apples to oranges. The other thing that we're operating under is a fixed number of buildings. So if you have 6, 7 schools that you're running, you're gonna have 7 administrators, maybe elevated administrative costs, where if you have fewer buildings, you might need less administration to run those buildings, or you can control those percentages a little bit. So it's normally, I'd say, around that 4% or lower, from what I have seen. It is challenging, though, to compare district to district. The best thing you can do is look at org charts and ask good questions about what those positions look like and what their job descriptions are, because even then, they could be different. So, yep.
But that's what auditors will look at too. They will look at the UFARs, and if they see administrator coded under something else, an auditor will correct that.
I think that's a good point, Mary Jo. And if you ask those questions, if you ask them to specifically highlight that, they'll look at the data they have and be able to compare.
That could be, if you would like a follow-up on just some comparisons and deep dive on ours. And maybe that would be something we could do in line with our audit in that September presentation.
I suspect that will be, as you just mentioned a second ago about the job description, something that Dr. Heil will be taking a look at to make sure that we're running the district the way that we need to. So yeah, no, it's good. It is hard. I mean, I've looked at MDE's reports, and it's hard to even really pick out a school. You can't really just pick out, like you said, enrollment on a school either because of the structure of the schools in to see where we're falling at. Some reports were high, some reports were right in the ballpark. So I look forward to seeing that in the next year, kind of how that all shuffles out. Any other comments on the 25-26 preliminary? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose the same sign. Thank you.
All right, good evening, Chair Klott, School Board members, Superintendent Krenz. So tonight we are bringing forward 10 policies for review and recommended approval. So as Director Hoffman and Director Schindler mentioned in their reports, we had a policy committee meeting June 2nd where we reviewed the following policies. So we are going to break it up a little bit. I'll take the first portion and then I'll ask Executive Director Durbin to join us for the second half. So at the Policy Committee, we did a review of Policy 101.2, 203, 203.2, 203.6, and 430. There were no recommended revisions, but again, just a review of these policies. And then what we did have for Policy 519 was a change to the interview procedures when looking at interviews of students by outside agencies. So that is a direct reflection of that change from the statute 260E.22. So that is tonight's portion regarding, I would say, these sets. I do ask for your approval of these policies.
I think we did note, Ashley, too, with the review of policy 203.6, is that if a consent item is pulled out of that list, it's supposed to be acted on immediately and not put to the end of the agenda. It's more of just a meeting operation thing, but does that ring a bell?
Yes, yep. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
So on that consent agenda, and I think Darcy has done a great job too, that is listed on our agenda under consent, that if something is pulled off, it is immediately taken action on afterwards and no longer further down in the board agenda. So that's where you get your 6.1.2 or 6.2 point,
Yeah.
kind of puts it right afterwards. Yep, thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, I will take a motion for all of the 5 policies. I guess there's 6 with the revision up there too that Ashley had brought up to our attention. Look for a motion to approve those policies.
So move.
Is there a second? Any other discussion on the policies? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose the same sign. Thank you very much. Well, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Oh, we got one more. Oh, yeah, I see you there. Gotta have it. Come on up.
Yeah. Can't get enough of
Must be
all
the
today.
time.
All right. So yes, we do have 4 more policies, or 3 for revision and 1 for review. So 701, this policy, establishment and adoption of school district budget. So adds authority for the board to consider use of available reserve fund balance. I think this is a proactive revision recommendation. Should legislation change where we can maybe move funds from one fund balance to another. So that's policy 701. Policy 704, fixed assets. So with fixed assets, this is something we monitor in the business office. I mentioned our construction and progress. This is similar. We take all assets that have material value and we monitor those in our financial systems using GASB and UFAR standards. So this one adds in that the accounting system shall be operated in compliance with the applicable provisions of the Uniform Financial Accounts and Report Standards, UFARs, with capitalization level that equals or exceeds $5,000. And then also adds group purchases for technology, furniture, or other equipment that purchase at a per quantity that otherwise may be below that item threshold. The threshold is $25,000. So this is something that we have been doing in our procedures. It's now in the policies, or in policy, and it also ties to policy 721. So essentially, if an item is $5,000 or greater in value, say we bought a vehicle as a school district, we would need to monitor that asset and its depreciation over time, since it is over $5,000. However, if we bought one item that was less than $5,000, we wouldn't have to enter it into that UFAR system. If we bought a handful of those items that are less than 5,000 and they equal over that 25,000 threshold, then we would have to add them to the. So for example, school furniture, when we bought all of our elementary furniture, we have to add those in as fixed assets. So, all right, policy 721, uniform grant guidance policy regarding federal revenue sources. Essentially, this updated a lot of language items and replacing CFR with Code of Federal Regulations and increased equipment, tangible personal property is defined with a cost of $10,000 versus $5,000. So similar to our fixed assets, they changed the definition of an equipment value to $10,000. And I think there was one other a lot of our funds we receive are federal funds. So when we look at this policy 721, uniform grant guidance, we call it the UG, these procedures should be in line for federal requirements of federal spending and receiving federal revenue. And so one of those requirements is that districts must take all necessary affirmative steps to assure that minority businesses, women's business enterprises, and labor surplus area firms are considered and used when possible. Now they're adding to that veteran-owned businesses to that definition. So that was an addition based off of federal guidelines. And then there's also an excerpt in here about cybersecurity stating that the school district must take responsible or reasonable cybersecurity and other measures to safeguard personal identifiable information, information that the federal agency or pass-through entity designates as sensitive, or other information that school district considers sensitive. So some pieces in here to make us in line with federal requirements for, or uniform grant guidance. So I believe that was all in that policy. I'm just gonna do a quick double check. Yeah, there's a section in there about mandatory disclosures, basically saying that if we violate any of those federal expectations, we would disclose it as a district, so. But otherwise, those are the revisions. And would you like me to jump into the review of 911? That one is a very simple rule. It's restricting.
Just got a quick question for you. You'd mentioned on 721 as federal, majority of ours is federal funds or state funds. Is that over supersede or does it matter? They're either federal or state?
I would just, in general, our federal funds, there's more requirements in those purchases. However, we use that uniform grant guidance for a lot of our procedures in our business office, so they're aligned, and then we don't have that worry about whether we're within those. Those standards are pretty common to be used across the board. You know, there might be variances in that $10,000 threshold and $5,000 for fixed assets or what's considered equipment, but we try to align them so that they're similar processes, so.
Okay.
On the review of policy 911, that policy is 2 sentences long, and it is no person shall ride or drive a snowmobile in or on any public school ground of Independent School District 241, and all terrain vehicles should not be operating on school grounds. So, pretty simple one to review there tonight.
All right, we'll clump these together again in one motion. So is there a motion to accept these policy revisions?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Neil seconds. All right, any other discussion of the above aforementioned? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose the same. Motion carries 5-0. Now I get to the bottom of it.
I worked in a district where 2/3 of the high school kids drove their snowmobile to school.
I thought we walked